morning, Mayor Holt. Nice to see you this morning. I am Margaret Cobos, for those who haven't seen this podcast before. I'm the founder and CEO of Oklahoma United, which is an Oklahoma-based nonpartisan nonprofit working on a variety of initiatives to improve the democracy in Oklahoma and government connections between the people and government in Oklahoma. That includes voter registration, civic literacy, engagement issues, and nonpartisan reform projects such as State Question 836. And that's why we're here today to talk with Mayor Holt about State Question 836, which is something he's been studying and looking into for many, many years, and is a strong advocate in favor of open primaries, the top two system that is proposed under State Question 836. So this podcast is a partnership with Vote Yes 836, a series of conversations from across the political spectrum to hear thoughts on the state of Oklahoma's political climate, how we might improve it, how our proposal for open primaries and State Question 836 fit into that landscape. So today, of course, I'm excited to introduce the leader, cheerleader, and leader of Oklahoma City, the wildly popular, acclaimed national head of the Conference of United States Mayors, David Holt. So for a little background, Mayor Holt was elected in 2018 with 78.5% of the vote, the largest percentage achieved by any non-incumbent since 1947. In 2022, he was reelected with more votes than any candidate for mayor in Oklahoma City since 1959. At the time he took office, he was the youngest mayor of Oklahoma City since 1923 and the youngest mayor of a United States city with more than 500,000 residents. There's no doubt, Mayor Holt, that you have contributed to a remarkable renaissance of Oklahoma City that has occurred over decades, but it has been accelerated drastically with your leadership. And I've been in Oklahoma City a little bit. I live in Tulsa, but I have family, friends. We're all very connected in Oklahoma, and we love seeing what is happening in Oklahoma City. And we want everybody to have the feeling that Oklahoma City is driving good things for the entire state, which we truly believe. So you have a wealth of experience. We're here today to ask you some questions and get to know you a little bit. And so I want to do a little icebreaker. Not that you need it because you're a pro, but I was thinking this morning as I chose my coffee cup about the one that I have in my hand, and that is my Theodore Roosevelt coffee mug. He is my favorite president. He's a Republican, outdoorsman, badass. And I just think he's, a great example of what a person can do with obstacles and adversity. And if I were going to have a president in my dining room for dinner, that would be the one. So I want to ask you, who is your favorite U.S. president in history?
Oh gosh. Well, he's certainly on the list, and I've read those biographies that are so great. I'm blanking on the name of the author, but the whole series.
David McCullough.
No, there was another one. He wrote a whole series on a whole series just on Teddy. But anyways, but certainly he'd be at the top of the list. I mean, all the greats. I don't know that I have any particular favorite. I got to work for one, President George W. Bush, and that was a great experience. And I have a lot of admiration for him. And maybe in keeping with sort of the bipartisan style that I've maintained, I've gotten to know President Clinton pretty well as a mayor, and I've really enjoyed that relationship and hosted him in Oklahoma City at OCU Law, where I also serve as dean earlier this year. So, I do have a lot of admiration in general for American presidents, and they're actually they typically have served as great examples of the kind of governance that I think we're talking about here today. I mean, most people historically who run for and serve as president are really seeking a unifying theme and seem to be at least trying to represent all Americans, understanding the limitations on that sometimes, but like that's kind of what I feel like I am as mayor is obviously representing all 712,000 people in the city, and great presidents, mayors, and governors and other representatives should certainly feel that way. By the way, we have a little bit of an assistant, a silent assistant here who tells us that Edmund Morris is the author I was trying to think of, who wrote the great biographies of Teddy Roosevelt that I
Okay, I'm going to recommend to anyone listening Mornings on Horseback. It is a David McCullough biography of Theodore Roosevelt, and it is just really tremendous. So I have a whole shelf of them. I share an affection for Theodore Roosevelt with former mayor of Tulsa, G.T. Bynum. Um, and I think he's actually on one of their foundations, like their, the Theodore Roosevelt Foundation or something
That's
like that.
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what that says about us, but it says something. So I want to go ahead and dive in now and just give you an opportunity to tell us about Oklahoma City and give us a very quick state of the city situation. You are doing so many great things there. I mentioned, we know you have the Olympics, part of the Olympics coming, the new Stadium. Tell us about things in Oklahoma City right now.
Yeah, well, it is truly the city's golden age, and that's a bold statement, but yet it's one that I think easily 70% of the residents would readily agree to. You look at, obviously there's sort of this cherry on top this year that stands in for all of our achievements, and that's the championship by the Thunder. That's an on court sports accomplishment that in some ways is superficial, but it really is a prism through which we view 30 years of progress. And as we sit here today, yeah, I mean, we have, you know, $10 billion of public investment, not even adjusted for inflation, but going back over 15 elections over the last 30 years to build a better city and a higher quality of life. The most recent commitment was a $2.7 billion investment in core infrastructure that our voters passed overwhelmingly in October. We have that coming. We've still got a lot of great Maps 4 projects. That was passed in 2019. Of course, Maps has sort of been the engine of a lot of this progress, specific investments in quality of life. And we've got a lot of those projects still yet to roll out over the next few years. And of course, we have that arena coming, $1 billion arena, which will be truly top tier on the whole planet, coming in 2028. 2028 will also bring us, as you alluded to, 7 events of the Los Angeles Summer Olympics, to the entirety of 2 sports, 16 straight days of events in Oklahoma City. We're the only city outside of Southern California that is hosting the entirety of a sport, and we have two. And that's a remarkable historic moment for our community. So yeah, a lot of amazing things. And of course, we're also, sitting on a record streak of unemployment below 4%, the longest streak in city history, 50 straight months. Crime rates are down. I mean, you just go down the list, developments all over the city, James Beard award winning restaurants. That's why it's a golden age. It's like I could analyze any category of life in Oklahoma City, and it's the best it's ever been. And this is not irrelevant to our discussion today. This is not just a separate commercial for Oklahoma City. None of that is possible. None of that is possible without the electoral system we have that is in many ways reflected in this proposed state question.
Right. I have to imagine that all of the things that you're talking about, the investment, the new people who have come in, the new businesses that have come in as a result of those investments have changed the complexion and the expectations of people in Oklahoma City. So I think I've heard you say before, once you have that success, it builds more success because people now in Oklahoma City expect it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we have built a great culture over time of high expectations and a willingness to invest in ourselves and an understanding that it takes working together across party lines, all of those things. Yeah. I mean, now it's become routine, and it certainly wasn't maybe at the beginning when all of these visions were being cast in the early 90s. The original maps famously only got 53%, 3 points away from not having any of these amazing things that have unfolded over the 30 years that followed. But now, yeah, I mean, Maps 4 got 72%, the arena got 71%, this recent bond issue got between 75 and 85%. Um, and then obviously, as you already said, I've gotten 78 and 60% for my elections. We have a really nice consensus in Oklahoma City. And yet, it's worth pointing out, we are politically and demographically a microcosm of the country. This county voted for Trump 49-48 in 2020 and 2024. That exact margin in both elections, 49-48, which listen, so obviously not too far off from the country, 50-50 essentially. And yet also the demographics reflect the country in many ways. When you look at a national demographic breakdown versus an Oklahoma City demographic breakdown. So I like to point all that out because I say, listen, we're running an experiment. This view that American politics are impossibly polarized because of our political differences or our demographic differences seems refuted here in Oklahoma City, where we have the exact same breakdowns politically and demographically, and yet we're getting 70 to 80% support for initiatives and candidates. What's the difference? And I say the difference is the way we elect people.
Right. And the fact that that dynamic has produced trust. You have built trust in Oklahoma City among the voters. You passed the first maps. It was hard to do, and you delivered. And then the next time, more voters could trust you. And so with that, I kind of want to contrast that with the state of state government. If you were giving us a state of the state, from your perspective in contrast, how would you grade them out?
Oh gosh, well, it would be pretty insulting, probably, the letter grade that I would deliver to state government. And yet, I would not say that they're unique. Most state governments and certainly the federal government are just completely dysfunctional these days and completely out of step with public opinion and public priorities. But that's because public opinion and priorities are measured across the entire electorate. But the state government leaders and the national government leaders are being elected by a very, very small subset at one extreme or the other. In Oklahoma, we tend to see it from the far right extreme, but obviously there's other states that are sending people to their state and federal governments that are from the far left extreme, right? In Oklahoma City, we don't elect people from the extremes because of the way we run elections. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted, most Oklahomans would tell you that they want their state government to focus on education, the economy, healthcare. I mean, just like infrastructure, like the stuff government's supposed to do. And instead, right now we're in the middle of a governor's race, and every commercial from all of the candidates is about trans kids in sports, which, I mean, I understand, like, all Americans and Oklahomans are certainly free to have opinions on that issue, but there's hardly anybody in the mainstream of Oklahoma thought that thinks that's the issue we should be electing our governor on, right? Like we should be talking about those kitchen table issues. But we don't because of the way we elect people. They're not necessarily doing anything stupid for the system that they're operating inside of because they got to go deal. The only electorate they answer to maybe does think that's the most important issue, but that's like 15% of the state, right? That's the problem. That's why the state government and the federal government are so dysfunctional, is that the people that serve there are answering to 15% of the electorate, either at the far right or the far left, leaving the 70% of us in the middle going, what in the world? Like what? Why? When do we get to speak? And the answer is never, really. You don't. We've cut you out of the process. And in Oklahoma City, by contrast, the 70% of the people are the ones who make the decisions. The 15% are certainly free to continue to vote and continue to advocate, and we'll listen to them as best we can. But they're not going to have more power than their numbers justify, and that's what makes that one makes all the difference. And that's why I try to say, it's like anytime people want to talk about policies, I always take it back to the way you elect people. You want to make real change, you've got to start giving all people the choice. And as it turns out, I think Oklahoma City proves that when all the people are making the decisions, we still make good decisions. We're not all idiots, but like when we get to do it all to collectively, we actually are capable of good governance. And we show that in Oklahoma City every day.
There's a really interesting thing that I've been hearing, and I know from polling that the state government has a favorability rating that rests in the 30 percentile. So about
Yeah.
30% of people trust our state government. And yet, on the other side of that, I'm hearing, and we saw this with recent legislation last year, there's a really strong contingent of elected people in state government right now who don't trust the citizens. So they don't trust us, and I guess we don't trust them. And I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but I know in our Oklahoma Constitution, it says that power is inherent in the people. And so
Hmm.
there you go. So it's our government. We pay the taxes, we pay the salaries, we expect some results. You have been delivering results in Oklahoma City. I've noticed through our work, and I always knew this, but every town, all these smaller towns, Hochatown, Pryor, Enid, everywhere, Shawnee, everywhere, Weatherford, everybody's doing tremendous work at a local level, and they're smart. I spoke with some people in Altus not long ago, very, just smart people doing smart things for their communities. Somehow that is not translating to the state level, and people feel like they've been let down. And I think maybe they have. And the way to cure that, I think, is, we haven't really talked about the policy of State Question 836, but
Yeah.
why don't we do that right now? Because you and I have had discussions about that. And you said early on, you said, look, there are really only two things that matter in this policy, and here's what they are. So I know
Yeah.
you know what those are. So you talk about the policy.
Yeah, right. And the reason that you're observing good governance in local communities in Oklahoma and dysfunctional governance at the state level is the difference between the way the two governments are elected. And so let's talk about that. We've kind of talked around it, but I first served at City Hall in Oklahoma City as the mayor's chief of staff from '06 to 2010. So I was very familiar with the way we elected people. And the way we elect people in Oklahoma City and Tulsa and in a lot of other communities around the state,
Everyone, every
virtually,
single
is
one,
it every single one? I don't know.
every
Yeah,
single one.
I figured, but is
Respect.
that every voter gets a ballot that has all the candidates listed on it. I'm saying this like I'm talking to a kindergartner, because it's like this is in fact how a high school kid would describe American democracy, but it's actually so foreign to the way that we operate on so many ways. But everyone gets a ballot that has all the candidates, and then that forces all the candidates to have to face everyone instead of just like weird narrow subsets of the electorate who have different priorities than the broader electorate. And it gives all the voters the chance to see and vote for or not vote for everyone running. Again, like if you ask the high school kid, how does American representative democracy work? This is what they would describe. But of course, then we would have to say, oh, no, no. We would never allow all the voters to get to vote on all the candidates. And we would certainly not force the candidates to have to actually satisfy the entire electorate. But we do it that way in Oklahoma cities, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and all the rest. And these are the two core principles you were just referencing, that all the voters get to see all the candidates and all the candidates have to face all of the voters. Sometimes people use the phrase open primaries, and that can mean like infinite things. And so that's why I always say these are the two principles, whatever your variation may have, these are the two principles that need to be met in an effective electoral system that will actually provide true representative democracy. So that's what we have in Oklahoma City. And so I got familiar with that serving in the mayor's office. Then I went to the state Senate and I ran in a closed partisan primary. And in that system, right, I only faced a small subset of the electorate. And people who, in my case, I'm a Republican, so people who were registered Democrat or independent, they never saw me. In fact, in my particular Senate district, they didn't actually get to vote on their senator for a quarter century because no Democrat had even filed to run for a very long period of time because there didn't seem to be any likelihood of success. So they didn't even have general elections. I actually never ran in a general election at all for Oklahoma Senate in the two times that I was elected as the senator from the 30th district. So that's a very different thing. It's okay. So suddenly you're just communicating to a small group of people. Now, if they were like scientifically selected to be representative of the whole, that might be different. But in fact, they're not. They're at one end of the ideological spectrum, and they're kind of at the far end because they're the people who are willing to show up in June for a primary. And actually, a lot of major decisions in Oklahoma politics are made in the August runoffs, which is even smaller subset. It's like the most hardcore people because a lot of people will tell you, "Oh, I'm a good voter. I vote every 4 years in November." Well, in politics, if you know what you're doing, that's not what you call a good voter. You're looking at the people who vote in August runoffs, and I mean, that's such an infinitesimal percentage of the state. You would go if you were running in a race like that, you'd knock on every 12th door in a neighborhood. I mean, like that's how few people you would be communicating with, and how few people would be making the final decision. So it's actually in 2014. I don't know if you know all this history, Margaret. Have we talked about all this? In 2014, the gubernatorial turnout for that governor's race was so pathetically low. It was like the worst in the country. And so after that, I came out with like 10 bills as a state senator. I had this whole package of bills intended to increase interest in, voting in Oklahoma. And at the top of my list was a top two primary system that mostly mirrored what was happening in Oklahoma cities, with the addition of allowing people to list their partisan label. I will add, in Oklahoma City, when you get a ballot for mayor, it doesn't say David Holt, comma Republican. It just says David Holt. And some people cling to that. They really want to know what you are. I think in my case, people know what I am because I was a state senator. I worked for President Bush. Like I'm kind of a known Republican, but it's not on the ballot. In the system I proposed in my legislation in 2014, and the system that you've got potentially on the ballot as a state question, it would list the party, and I think that's fine. I think that's fine. Like that's good information. I know that that will bring comfort to some people to know that they at least know what you're registered as. And so that's what I introduced, and I didn't expect it to get a hearing, but I wanted to start having that conversation. And I started making presentations about it to groups like the Oklahoma Academy and others. And that was, over 10 years ago. And so those seeds continued to sprout. And here we are today, thanks to your leadership and your persistence and vision. We have a real chance now to actually consider this as an electorate here in Oklahoma. And so what you've proposed is really kind of the system we have for the most part in these Oklahoma cities. And what it does is it's just a completely different incentive structure for the candidates. When you run, as I did, now you need to appeal to the entire electorate, which is again, I thought, well, how you were supposed to serve. I think most people would say that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to represent everybody. So it sets the center of political gravity where it actually exists, and it incentivizes the candidate to get support from not just their own party, but from independents and from members of another party. You can only stretch that so far. I mean, I don't get 100% when I run for mayor, but listen, I got 78 and 60%. Nobody's gotten those numbers for governor of Oklahoma, but very rarely. Nobody's gotten 60% for president in like, I don't know, a century or something. I mean, like it's hard in these partisan primary systems to get that sort of broad support, but you can do it when you have an electoral system like this. So it's time for the Oklahoma people to have that choice. Obviously, in the end, it's going to be their choice. It's not being foisted upon them. But I'm really thrilled that your group is gathering the signatures, and I hope obviously that part succeeds, and then that the voters get that option. I believe they will choose that option because why wouldn't everybody want to get the chance to choose our future leaders? But that's for another day. But at the very least, they deserve that chance. Obviously, the legislature is never going to give them that chance because it serves their purposes to keep the system the way that it is. In many ways, this whole debate is sort of the people versus the powerful, but there's a whole lot more people than there are the powerful. And I hope in the end we'll be able to demonstrate that.
Right. Our movement, this and I started this thinking, let's just find one thing that we can do that will uh, start to produce better results for Oklahoma overall. And I look at it as someone from the outside who I've given to a little bit to different candidates in the past, and was still disappointed, waiting for something to get better, and then realizing that the system that we have has produced where we are. And we cannot blame any elected politician today for working within the system as it
Right.
is. So it is what it is. Candidates are motivated intelligently to seek votes and support where, that will bring success. What we need to do if we really want fundamental change and to lower the temperature in Oklahoma, I think what excites me a lot about what we're doing is that we're going to show, just like you have in Oklahoma City, when we win with this, we're going to show that Oklahoma can be different. We can overcome obstacles. We can practice some common sense. We can lead in a way that is maybe unexpected by a lot of people on both coasts and both ends of the spectrum. I think as a state, we've been overlooked and underestimated for a long time. And I just know, having been here for, 4 generations, we're better than that, and we have so much untapped talent. I think what appeals to people when we get out in the, front porches and bleachers and all these places we're collecting signatures, one of the things that really appeals to people is the accountability issue. So they love the idea that they're all going to be treated the same when they go vote under the 836 system, up under an open primary. When we all go to vote, we're going to approach the table and we're all going to get the same menu. It is no different than going to Chili's. It is no different than going to Chick-fil-A or wherever it is you go. We all get the same piece of paper. It is orderly. We know how to do it. We do it every day. And so we can make a choice and then move on. There's no separation. And we get to treat our neighbors like our neighbors and our coworkers like our coworkers. And I look forward to a day under 836 in an open primary when you can actually be in the kitchen, the office kitchen, and somebody's getting something to drink out of the fridge, and you say it's Monday, right? And the election is Tuesday. And you say, I haven't really decided who I'm going to vote for. What do you think? And it won't matter. You can have that conversation now, and
Yeah, everybody gets to vote.
you can seek input from people who right next to you, and that's how you deliver consensus. And then I think on the flip side, as a candidate, what we're hoping to see is a lot more people willing to run and serve. So why don't you speak to that? Because I think there's been a real chill on people putting their names out there, putting their families out there in a pretty toxic, sometimes even dangerous environment. Why don't you talk about
Yeah,
that?
sure. Well, we've already alluded to it, the kind of insanity of the current governor's race. We have 4 million people in the state. There are a lot of talented men and women who could be our governor and could do a fabulous job bringing people together, casting a vision on all of the fronts that we need to work on, whether they be economic, education, healthcare, et cetera. But under the current system, where basically most of Oklahomans don't really get a choice, a real choice in who our next governor will be, any candidate who goes and starts talking to like the people who do this for a living, right? They would say, "Hey, I'm a talented person. I've had a great background in leadership. I think I'd be a great governor. I think I've got like a network of people. I think I can get the money together, and I want to work on these issues that I just described." Right? Any um, good political consultant would tell them probably to do some version of what you're seeing right now. They'd say, forget about, don't talk about the economy or public education or healthcare. Like, that's not what the people who will make this decision care about. And of course, the candidate would say, but I don't understand. Everyone I talk to cares about those issues. And the political consultant would say, yeah, but none of those people are going to get to vote on who the governor is. That's not how this works. And that political consultant would be doing a good job of helping that person envision how they would get to this outcome of being the governor. But obviously, what I've just described is a nightmare for representative democracy. And it's why we're in the state that we're in as a state of Oklahoma. Um, this is the problem, right? And so, to your point about it chilling the environment for candidates, well, most people will get up from that table and say, I think I got something better to do for the next 4 years of my life than cut bananas in TV commercials. Like I actually thought I wanted to work on these things. Maybe I'll work on them some other way, like I don't need to be the governor. Um, and so, the talented people, and there are amazingly talented people in every community in this state are largely shut out because what kind of talented person would want to run in a system like that where they only can focus on bizarre issues that are only interesting and prioritized at the farthest extremes of the ideological spectrum? Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? And as you said, like, also, the people who are so rabid about those issues tend to be very toxic personalities. They tend to kind of harass you. I mean, they might even come to your place of business, your home. I mean, I've seen it all as a political official in however many long nearly 16 years of elected office. I mean, it's just a terrible, terrible outcome that we have given ourselves as a people because we are not really we collectively as the entire state of Oklahoma are simply not choosing our leaders and all that there's a beautiful simplicity in what you're proposing in this state question. Let all the people vote. Let all the people vote. If you can't win an election anymore because all the people are voting, I think that's more your problem than ours, right? And that's what I keep getting. I keep getting from the far extremes is, well, we can't have this. This will change the way that we serve. This will change who gets elected. And I'm like, because all the people are voting, it will change the type of person that's elected. Aren't you just kind of reinforcing the point I'm making? Like I think whatever your viewpoint, if you're so sure that that's what everyone in Oklahoma thinks, then you shouldn't be afraid of this at all because you just need all it does is let everybody vote. There's nothing the manipulation is what's happening now. Like that's the distortion of democracy is what we currently are living through. What you're proposing is has a beautiful simplicity to it. Let the people vote. Let everybody vote. That's all it is. It's democracy, it's representative democracy as it was always envisioned from the founding fathers on.
Right. I want to mention just for a minute because I know you have younger kids and I think a lot about young people. We know that most young people, a large number of them, when they register to vote, if they do, they register independent. So State Question 836 is honestly, to me, it's about our future. It's about Oklahoma in 20 years. It's not even the fact that we pass this is not going to change who we are, but it will enable and empower those young people to have a tool, the only tool that really matters, which is the vote, and be able to govern themselves and make decisions for their futures. Right now, we know that a lot of them are looking at the system and they know that something is not okay with it. It's convoluted, it's complicated, they don't understand why, they don't want to affiliate with one single party, one single platform. They want, a la carte. And they don't, and so what they do is they either register independent because they can't tolerate being put in a box, or they don't register at all. We are finding a lot of people who are so, and I want to say apathetic, but that sounds like a kind of a passive. feeling. And you talked about people being angry and, protesting and everything. We do see a lot of that. We've seen both extremes in Oklahoma over the last 10 years. Everybody is, I mean, protesting is now kind of a thing. Like it might have been in the 70s or the 60s, right? Why are we doing that? To me, the answer is because people are feeling that they are not being heard. When they are not heard for a long period of time, there are two choices. They either walk away from the system, and a lot of Oklahomans have. They walk away, they're hiding. They don't want to have anything to do with it. It's unpleasant. They don't want to argue, or they go out and they make a homemade sign and they march around. So neither of these are actually constructive reactions to me. I understand them, but what we're trying to do with 836 is give people a path to actually do something about that in the form of a vote.
Yeah, well said. I got very little to add to that, I don't think. But I mean, ultimately, democracy only works when it actually reflects the will of the electorate. And I could just go down a laundry list of issues and priorities over the last decade or so, where the legislature did things that were supported like by 30% of Oklahomans, like 30-70 issues in the parlance of politics. You'd say like, oh, this is an 80-20 issue or a 70-30 issue or a 90-10 issue. Usually when you say that sort of thing, you mean this is a position where a supermajority of the electorate feels one way, and that's why you would probably go that direction. It's kind of insanity that time and time again we're seeing the legislature choose that minority position, but it's a majority position in the electorate they answer to, right? And so it's flipped democracy on its head. And yes, that creates frustrations, obviously, that eventually boil over, and maybe we kind of already are. I mean, maybe this movement is an example of that boiling over. At some point, we have to have democratic outcomes that reflect the electorate. And if that 30% on some particular topic wants to win, they have that option. It is called persuasion. It is called the democratic process. It is called come up with arguments, build your coalition, like convince me to
It is
view.
actually work. It is work.
Yeah, like put in the work, like get yourself get from 30 to 51. But right now they've just sort of manipulated the system where they just cut out the 70% that don't agree with them, and they get their way. And that's not how this is supposed to work. And obviously eventually it collapses. I mean, the democratic experiment only works in this country as long as the outcomes reflect the people. And the people are not getting a vote right now in Oklahoma. And that's a problem. And we're trying to address it.
So I'm going to just give one last question here. You told me a long time ago that when you handle the city of Oklahoma City passes a MAPS project or completes a major initiative, that you gather around the people the very, very next day. And the question on the table is what's next? And
Right. Well, it may be more
so
metaphysical than that. I don't know that we literally gather around the table the next day, but it is very true that in this community now for 30 years, I mean, when you think about all the things we've accomplished, it would be very reasonable to think that there would be a bit of a resting on laurels after that, right? And yet, I mean, every single time over these last 30 years in Oklahoma City, and it certainly predates even me, that we have done something incredibly exciting, we follow it up almost immediately with the next thing. I mean, it's kind of like breathtaking. And I could see if you were another city around the country, a mid-sized city like ours, our renaissance feels farther and farther out of reach every year because we just keep going and it's exponential growth at this point. I alluded to this earlier, but since 1993, the original passage of maps and including that vote, we as a city are 15-0 in tax initiative proposals put before the voters to fund capital investment. And that totals $10 billion, not adjusted for inflation. Um, that's incredible. And it shows. I mean, 15 initiatives over 30 years, that's on average every 2 years we're going back to people. We've never said like, we're good. Like that was the end of it. We can now move on into a new era. No, we always say, what's next? What can we do next? I mean, not 3 months after winning the NBA championship, we were voting on a $3 billion infrastructure package. Now we're talking about Can we have something on public transit here in the next couple of years? 2 years ago, we voted on the arena. 4 years before that, we voted on maps four. I mean, we just don't stop. And I love that about us. It's a very dynamic city, a very visionary and aggressive, but outcome oriented city as well. That's the great thing is that a lot of people can have ideas, but we also carry them all the way through.
So that's what we want to build with State Question 836 and open primaries. This is going to be like our first maps, and we're going to work really hard. But when we win, hopefully the next thing will be equally important. I don't know what it would be, but hopefully it will develop that trust that you've had. And so if you were thinking about someone who's listening to this podcast or watching it, and you imagine State Question 836 has passed, then what do you think the state would look like that, next day, next year?
Well, we will take time to elect people that are thinking about the economy, public education, healthcare, all these basic issues. Like it'll take some time for the system to work, right? To finally elect leaders who represent the entire electorate that they serve. But almost immediately, I think because the motivations will now be in place, the incentive structure will now be in place. Almost immediately, anyone who wants to continue to be elected, even if they're already in office, will start communicating differently. They'll start prioritizing different things. Like they'll actually prioritize the issues that matter. They'll realize that now they'll be punished for being out at the extremes, right? Like what we had at the State Department of Education, for example, for these last couple of years, like that would have been really bad politics moving into this new era, whereas it was arguably good politics for that person in the era that we're currently in. Maybe he went so far that like it even actually was turning into bad politics for him because it was just so absurd and insane. But normally, I mean, like that's kind of a behavior that can be rewarded in this current system. But that kind of behavior in a new system that you're proposing, never it would never happen unless you basically wanting to commit political suicide. Like you would be punished for that kind of behavior immediately. And so that's what I think. I think people will get around tables and they'll say, "Wow, we can finally talk about the real issues. We can talk about visionary ideas. We can talk about things that will appeal across a broad electorate, that will bring together Republicans, Democrats, and independents." Those ideas just aren't welcome today. And so it's the beginning of a new era. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma would be in 1993 OKC. I mean, you'd have to be at the beginning, got a lot of work to do, but finally you'd have the foundation that you could build upon. You finally have an environment where you could actually have those conversations because there's no hope for those conversations right now. Anybody who reads the paper could tell you that. Like it's just the lowest common denominator day after day after day, and it only seems to be getting worse.
Well, so if you were to issue a call to action to somebody who's listening to this, you're very familiar with all of this. You've watched the petition process. I know you're fully aware, we're in signature gathering. Hopefully we'll be on a ballot in November of 2026. If someone is listening to this, they're interested in a better Oklahoma and they've been looking for an answer, what would you tell them to do?
Well, if they're listening to it in the next month or two, as we sit here, it's early December of 2025. They need to go find a signature pad somewhere, and I'm sure you can help them with that. And maybe that'll be your side off, but they need to sign the petition, and they shouldn't assume that they'll just happen across somebody in front of Walmart. I mean, they probably should intentionally go seek them out, and I know you've got places for that. And then beyond that, if somebody's listening to this into 2026, hopefully we've gathered the signatures and we're talking about being on the ballot. And then I would say, continue to think about it. Obviously, we've made it clear where we stand. We want your yes vote, but it's perfectly reasonable for you to continue to think about it. But what I think will ultimately happen is this is kind of a no-brainer unless you do live at the fringes of the ideological spectrum. And I think most people will fall in love with the simplicity of this as they learn more about it. And we'll have very little objection to the idea that everybody gets to vote. That's kind of like basic American governance. So I think it's got great potential should it make the ballot, and but nevertheless, we certainly want to get those arguments in front of them, and I'm sure, as you will as well, be out there making those arguments in that next phase. But I think this is one of the most exciting initiatives that has been proposed in this state in a very long time. And I think people will be kind of swept up in that excitement and that potential, and envisioning that day where we can literally or metaphorically sit around a table as a state and talk about the real issues, the challenges and opportunities facing us. I think that's kind of inspiring, and I think people are going to get pretty fired up about that.
I'm excited. I'm fired up. Let's go do it. Okay. So yes, the website that anyone would need to go to is voteyes836.com. And you can find locations to sign the petition. You can also email from that website, info@voteyes836.com, and a real live person will respond to you and help you get to a signature collection point if you wish. So lots of information there, and I appreciate your time today, Mayor Holt. We want you to stay in public service as long as possible. So just keep going and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for your commitment to this. I mean, you are obviously a volunteer, and it's really inspiring how you've taken this on as a passion project. And it'll be a great legacy if we can get this done. And I'm very grateful to you.
Well, I'm excited to be part of it, and we've got a great team, and it includes you. Thank you.
Thank you.